to start there. Good evening. It's the calm after the storm as many continue to deal with the impacts of Friday's windstorm, but the damage it left behind still lingering throughout the GTA, including here near Bloor and Royal York. You can see part of a tree still remaining here on the front lawn. It was once toppled right on top of this vehicle here that was parked. You could see the top of the vehicle is just completely caved in. So cleanup is well underway today. Many are getting a first-hand glance at just what damage was caused by the storm.
The tree came down, the wires caught alight, and then so that was kind of falling onto the grass. The neighbor and the house where connected to the burning wires came out, and she was saying there was smoke in her basement and around the box. And
first I focused on the tree, and then I turned around and I saw my car was captured under the live wire.
$1,000 spent to remove this 66-foot tree that toppled a parked vehicle on private property, forced down by yesterday's gusting winds. It set off a domino effect when live wires started fires across the street.
Another thing you can zoom on, the grass being burned, the plastic, it's right there, it's under my car.
Never knew it would be us. We actually tried to call 911 because of the fire, and none of the houses could call 911 at all.
Yesterday's windstorm also behind the deaths of 2 men in Halton Hills. A forestry worker was struck by a fallen tree and was pronounced dead at the scene. A second man was also rushed to hospital with serious injuries. In Hamilton, police say live wires are behind the death of a man in his 50s. Winds were gusting up to 110 kilometers an hour in some areas. In addition to downed trees and poles and more than 400 hydro wires, some residents had their roofs ripped off and dozens of traffic lights were also out. Tens of thousands without electricity since yesterday afternoon. The mayor saying the hurricane-force winds caused a lot of damage across the city.
Well, I think the city's pulling itself back together after one of these May storms.
Was this something that was expected?
Well, you always expect there's going to be a storm, but I think sometimes the severity of these storms, happens at the moment. When you have 900 calls coming in, different calls on the hydro wires, and 60,000 customers out, that's a big job to get it back, and they did well.
How does this compare to the snowstorm a couple of weeks ago?
Well, it's much bigger in terms of the number of calls received. In fact, if you go back to the much bigger ice storm of 2013, this even produced more calls than that. There's a couple of things we're going to take a look at, including the surge of phone calls, but I think people did very well.
And at the peak, 68,000 people were left without power here in the city of Toronto. Let's get an update with Toronto Hydro here. I'm joined by Tori Gass. What can you tell us in terms of how many people are without power this evening?
Well, we have been making progress. So since yesterday, when it was 68,000 customers at the peak, we're now down to 13,000 customers. That's still quite a bit. So we've got our crews working around the clock to see if we can get power back to everybody.
And we're also seeing not too far from here some downed wires, live wires. How common is that throughout the city?
Well, we are dealing with about 400 calls of downed wires throughout the city. That is an extreme number. So we've been saying we're in an emergency situation, and these downed wires, it's always great. You've got to treat them as live. So don't go near them. You need to stay at least 10 meters back. The easiest way to remember that is the length of a school bus. We've heard stories about people going underneath caution tape. There are areas that have been taped off around the city. Please don't do that. Don't take shortcuts. Make sure to take the time and just go around. It's for your safety.
Now, we heard the mayor right there. I spoke with him earlier today, and he said this is worse than the storm we had just a couple of weeks ago. How does that compare for Toronto Hydro?
It is definitely worse, actually. If you think about it, to give you some of that context, we had 44,000 customers out at peak for that storm. This one was 68,000, and it all happened in one short late afternoon, evening. Everything was finished by 9 o'clock last night. So that storm was really strong, came in fast and furious, and caused a lot more damage than what we saw from that ice storm a few weeks ago.
And I know our friends here in this neighborhood, Royal York, near Bloor, we saw a couple of residents actually running up to you saying, when am I going to get my power back on? What's your answer at this point to residents who are left without power?
Well, that's everyone's number one question on their mind, and we understand that. That's what we are looking for as well. So we are taking our time with that. We've had 900 outages in the city today from yesterday. That is a huge volume, so we haven't been able to provide individual restoration times. What we're doing now is we're trying to get them now. Things have calmed down a little bit. We've got that number a bit under control. But what it means is we've got to be talking to our crews in the field, getting that information and that intel back from them, knowing what they need to do, and then figuring out how long the fix will take for each outage.
Now, do we know if it's going to take the day? Is it going to take a couple of days? Do you know if by Monday everyone's going to have power?
It's really difficult to say. And I know that's not exactly what people want to hear, and it's not what we want to tell them. We would love to be able to say we've got a time when it's going to be back. Unfortunately, it's just so many that are out there, so we just can't really say at this point.
Okay, our thanks to Tori Gass, and as mentioned, hydro crews are alerting residents, stay away from down wires and just exercise caution.